You are now tuned into Check This Out News. We connect the streets.
Hello. This is Alex B. with Check This Out News. Here, excited to engage in a conversation around automation, robots, and Black folks. There is a well-documented, persistent, and growing racial wealth gap between African American families and the white families in the United States. Studies indicate that the median white family in the United States holds 10 times more wealth of the median African American family. To make matters worse, as a result of the pandemic, companies are investing big time into automation, robots, and AI. Endgame for African American and people of color workers who are particularly at risk. According to a recent report by the consultancy McKinsey, African American workers will have a higher rate of job displacement than the general U.S. population due to automation, AI, and robots. The World Economic Forum has estimated that 75 million jobs may be displaced by a shift in the division of labor between humans and machines, while 133 million new roles may emerge that are more adapted to the new division of labor between humans, machines, and algorithms. Today, we have special guest, civil rights leader and activist, Dr. Benjamin Chavis, to discuss automation, robots, and Black folks. Doctor, I'm so excited to be here with you. As a civil rights leader who's had the privilege of working along Dr. Martin Luther King, what do you think Dr. King would say after hearing the latest data and how automation will impact jobs, leaving many displaced?
Well, thank you, first of all, Alex B., for the opportunity to talk to you and to check this out. I love that name, check this out, about where we are in terms of technology, innovation, machines versus humans, vice versa. If the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. were alive today, and if he were witnessing what is happening with AI and robots and technology, I would say that first, Dr. King believed in science.
Get him!
He believed in innovation.
Get him!
But he also believed in what he would term as the beloved community. The beloved community is where everybody's treated with respect, with a sense of elevating what I would call the oneness of humanity, where every child of God should be treated equally, no matter of race, no matter of socioeconomic circumstance, no matter whether or not one had access to technology or did not have access to technology, that everybody would be treated fairly and equally. But you pose a very important question, Alex, and that is the truth of the matter is innovation will displace some jobs. The question is, how should we prepare for that? I don't think we should be, Dr. King would not be anti-technology. He would not be anti-progress.
Yeah!
He would not be anti-AI. He would try to figure out, how does AI fit within the beloved community? How does even robots fit? And algorithms, keep in mind, robots are programmed by humans. Algorithms are written by humans.
Mm-hmm.
So it is the intent and the activity and the actions of human beings that ultimately will determine who will get displaced in the job market or who will have access to the job market. So I want to start with the principle of freedom, justice, and equality. And I think if we start with that principle, freedom, justice, and equality for all, without discrimination based on race or discrimination based on socioeconomic circumstance or discrimination based on sexual orientation or discrimination based on any factor. I think Dr. King would oppose that discrimination, but he would welcome innovation. He would welcome progress of technology to the extent to which that progress would open more jobs opportunities to people of African descent rather than less job opportunities. Therefore, education becomes very important. The curriculums of school systems, the curriculums need to prepare our young people for the future. We're in the digital age. We're in the technology age. We're in the age of artificial intelligence. So that should be embraced in a way that creates more diversity, equity, and inclusion, not less.
I couldn't agree with you more. Education definitely is key when it comes to creating opportunities. For so many years, African Americans have had such a disparity between what access we had versus what was really out there. How does education being so key play a role in us ensuring that we don't miss the boat on these opportunities?
Well, first of all, education starts at the home. Even before the young person gets to pre-K or elementary school or junior high school or high school, and certainly post-secondary education and higher education in college, and then even postdoctorate. I think education is a part of one's life journey. Certainly we want to, I'm a strong supporter of the public school system. And I think public education ought to be inclusive. It's interesting, as you know, Alice, there's a big debate now about critical race theory. There's a big debate about whether or not education should teach people the truth about history. To me, it should not be a debate. The Bible says truth will set you free. So we shouldn't fear the truth. We should embrace the truth. And you should not deny a good education to every child. I think everybody needs a great, high quality education. And today, education has to include the technological innovations. We all know there's somewhat of a digital divide in many communities of color. There's a broadband divide in communities of color. So we just need to try to bridge those divides so that every child has access to broadband, every child has access to digital innovations, but also not only the child, but also the parents. Because again, the greatest classroom before you get to school is at the home. And I think young people should be encouraged to have a broader vocabulary, reading skills. Literacy is so important. We're doing this podcast so people will hear what we're saying, but also I want to encourage people to read. I think we need to be literate in all the manifestations of dissemination of information. COVID-19, we're in the context right now, still going on. And what is exposed is not only the pre-existing health conditions of people of color, but the pre-existing conditions with the absence of access to technology, the absence of access to broadband. And at a time where our society, the pendulum is swinging very rapidly toward greater innovation. So the whole question of displacement, your first question, is still a real question. But I think we should always face problems with also what are the opportunities to solve the problems? What are the opportunities to engage communities, particularly communities of color, in providing solutions? I want us to learn not only how to react to the algorithms and the artificial intelligence programs that others are doing. I think we should be involved in coding. Our young people need to learn technology. We should be writing algorithms because the truth of the matter is all computer programs are themselves culturally sensitive. Why? Because a human being programmed them. And we all bring to whatever we're doing our own understandings, our own sense of values, and I can say our own prejudices. But prejudice does not necessarily lead to racism. Racism is when you have the racial prejudice, but you have the power to enforce and establish that racial prejudice to deny opportunity to others who you may not like or you may have some prejudice against. That's what institutionalized and systemic racism arises in our society. So I believe that when I first heard about Tech This Out, I said, man, that's a great platform because it not only has these discussions like we're having today, but I'm hoping that when people listen, they will be moved, they will be inspired to increase their own aspirations, not just to listen to somebody talk about this, but to engage themselves. One of the things I learned working with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the Civil Rights Movement, the strength of the movement was the participation of people. It's participatory. When you get people to participate in voting, it makes a big difference in voting rights. When you get people to participate in housing, equal housing, it makes a big difference because people not only gain a sense of what home ownership is about, but to leverage home ownership as an asset in wealth building. I think we have to engage. People say, well, how can we end poverty? You have to engage the people who are in poverty to eliminate the poverty. Poverty will not be eliminated from the outside. It has to be eliminated from the inside to the extent to which we'll equip people with education. That's what we're talking about. And this particular time, particularly technological education, education on environmental situations, on climate situations, but also education on digital education, digital literacy. And that's what I think Tech This Out is about. It's about raising the bar so that everybody can be competent in the digital space, that everybody can be competent in the artificial intelligence space. So that's what I'm hoping, and that's why I'm looking forward to continuing to work with Tech This Out and also with Digital Mind State.
Yes, I think it's so important to spur that curiosity so that others are encouraged to explore and learn more, because you're right, it's not just that the world is ending, that there's so much currently happening where we have an opportunity to really at the forefront get in and understand how these new metaverses are impacting the world, how we can contribute to them, how we can have our voices heard, because we're all creating this human experience. So I think that it's really important that we continue to educate ourselves and stay very curious about the way that robots, automation can help us, especially as we're at this, like so much is changing so fast in front of us. Do you think that schools, in particular HBCUs, are equipped to deal with the challenges that, will impact the workforce?
Well, I'm a proud graduate of HBCU, Howard University.
Yes.
Was fortunate to get my doctorate degree from Howard. And of course, there are over 200 HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities, all over the United States. And I believe that there is a willingness, I believe there is a growing expectation, and I think also enthusiasm among the leaders, the academic leaders at HBCUs, from the chancellors and the presidents on down to the deans of the various schools, to want to further expand the educational process, to have more technology in the delivery of higher education. I think that certainly there's a resource question. HBCUs don't get the resources of some of the other major universities. A lot of our HBCUs don't have major endowments, although some are beginning to build some endowments, which is encouraging. So I would say that the glass is half full. Alex, on that question, is not half empty. But because the glass is half full, I think we have a foundation to build upon. I think if you look at NASA, the National Aeronautic Space Association, African Americans have always played a role in technology, in STEM, in science, technology, education, engineering, and mathematics. I think this is so important that there's be a stress right now on mathematics in particular, which leads to engineering and other forms of education. So I'm optimistic. As a graduate of HBCU, you ask, are HBCUs ready to embrace digital technology, to embrace artificial intelligence, to embrace robots? I would say the answer is yes. But I think that we should point, though, realistically, that there is a resource challenge. I think our historically black colleges and universities need more resources so they can expand their curriculum, so they can expand their academic offerings to be offering more in the technological fields going forward. Now, that does not negate the importance of the arts or the importance of social education along with technical education. I myself, I have a degree in chemistry. And when I wound up working with the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., I wound up working in theology and religion and philosophy, even though my training is in the pure science and as a chemist. And I see no contradiction. I think that the more I think about this, Alex, we need more interdisciplinary education where you just don't get expertise in one field. You have to get an expertise in many different fields because we live in an interdisciplinary world where science, arts, with space. That's not all. If everybody was all astrophysicists, and we would lose the psychiatrists and the psychologists and the social workers, we would still be in trouble. So it's the interdisciplinary challenge, but also the interdisciplinary opportunity today to have a broad education and not just a narrow education.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you say that because I can recall you'd shared back in 1982 when you went back to your hometown and learned about, what was a proposed landfill where, toxic chemicals would be poured into the soil. Is it because you had that interdisciplinary education and really understood what civil rights meant across the board that you were able to really advocate to ensure that, your community and communities coming behind you wouldn't be impacted by not just the disparities that exist among, civil rights, but also environmentally? And then as we look into space, how that will also impact us moving forward?
Thank you. That's another very good question. Certainly in 1982, by that time, I had finished college. I had a chemistry degree, and I was working by 1982 on my doctorate at Howard in philosophy, in religion, in ministry. Uh, it was I'm from North Carolina originally. I was born in Granville County, which is one county over from Warren County. Warren County was the most predominantly black county of the 100 counties in North Carolina. It is also an agricultural place. Topographically, Warren County also had a shallow aquifer. What that means is the water level was very close to the surface. And most people in Warren County got their water from wells. Everybody drilled their own wells. They didn't have access to a lot of public water systems. So that's the last place, Alex, if you would want to dig a hole called a landfill, put some plastic down the landfill, and then you start dumping tons and tons of PCB, polychlorinated biphenyls, which is very carcinogenic, which is very cancer-causing. That was the case. That was the governor of North Carolina made that decision. So we went to protest, civil rights protests. Last thing I want to do is get arrested again in my home state of North Carolina, but I did get arrested in 1982 for leaving that protest against that, what I thought was not only illegal dumping, immoral dumping, but it was a violation not only of the black community's civil rights, but also a violation of the black community's human rights, and which later now we call it was a violation of our environmental rights. Back in those days, there hadn't not been a connection or intersection between civil rights and environment, or between the civil rights and climate. And now I'm writing about civil rights and space rights. A lot of people say, well, how do you make these interconnections? Going back to what I said previously, because I have an interdisciplinary background. I know some science, I know some philosophy, I know some brothers and sisters in the community. And whether you have a degree in these disciplines or not, you know the difference between right and wrong. It was wrong to pick that predominantly black agricultural community to be dumped on. And that's when I coined the term environmental racism in 1982 as a result of those protests, as a result of my unjust arrest. And now look at today. We're in 2021. There's a whole not only national movement of environmental justice in the United States, there's a global movement about environmental justice throughout the world. So it shows, that one little struggle. Yes, some 500 people arrested, including myself, but that 500 people now has multiplied, has amplified to millions and hundreds of millions of people all over the world who are crying out for freedom, justice, and equality in the sense of the environment. So I believe the same thing is going to happen now with space rights. I'm trying to make these connections to interdisciplinary endeavor, interdisciplinary thinking, interdisciplinary movement building. I see a connection. That's not only connecting the dots, but we're connecting people. We're connecting circumstances. We're connecting challenges, but we're also connecting opportunities. And that's why I think we need to not only think about what's good for this planet, we have to think what's good for all the planets. We need to think about what's not only good for all of humanity, but we need to think about what is good intercollectively, what is good for the whole creation of the universe.
Yes, very much cause and effect, the ripple effect that every decision and action we take has and continues to impact moving forward, which makes a lot of sense. You had mentioned before that, COVID-19 really did point out disparities within the community about access, not just to broadband, technology. So back in 2019, President Donald Trump signed the Futures Act, which made a significant, allocation of federal funding for HBCUs permanent beyond 2019. Did he or the pandemic save HBCUs?
Well, I don't think Donald Trump saved HBCUs, and I don't think the pandemic served HBCUs. But even though I disagree with a lot of what the Trump administration did, I do believe in giving credit when credit is due. He did do something that no other American president did, and that was make the annual allocation of federal funds to support historically black colleges and universities. He made it permanent. He didn't make it annual. So he was the first president to do that. But keep in mind, he had to have something to support. HBCUs have always struggled on the resource question. State funding, federal funding, private funding, philanthropic funding. Unfortunately, in the past, and even now, HBCUs get the crumbs, economic crumbs, off someone else's table. And again, I'm not knocking support. I think we need to increase support federally, increase support statewide, increase support philanthropically, and certainly increase support corporately of historically black colleges and universities. Today, Alex, HBCUs graduate the majority of African-American teachers, African-American doctors, African-American scientists, African-American engineers, African-American nurses. I could just go on and on and on. And so HBCUs is making an invaluable contribution to our democracy, making an invaluable contribution to the progress of America. And so if there's any academic institution that more than deserves support, not only from the federal government, but from states and other entities, is HBCUs. But COVID exposed these pre-existing conditions. And of course, there's something called the social determinatives of health. Poverty is a social determinative of one's health. Mm-hmm. Homelessness is a social determinative of one's health. Mass incarceration is a social determinative of one's health. Racially motivated police brutality often can determine whether or not you live or not, or die or not. We know about driving while black, walking while black, jogging while black, and in some senses with George Floyd, breathing while black. And so I think that this is a challenge that we can rise to this occasion. I'm a strong supporter of the Black Lives Matter movement. These young people took to the streets. They learned a lot from what we did in the 1960s. I was glad to see them out there protesting. But I would say that protesting gets you to the threshold. You got to do more than protest. You got to go across the threshold of social change. You got to make sure we have the right legislation, like the George Floyd Police and Justice Act, like the John Lewis reauthorization of the Voting Rights Act. We need more legislation that establishes better, fair housing. Too much housing discrimination in America. But I come to this interview, Alex, as an optimist. Sometimes when we discuss these problems, people can get a little discouraged because say, wow, this is some profound stuff that we face. It is profound. But I've learned that when you have a profound challenge, you rise to the occasion of that challenge profoundly and organize. I think that there's no problem that we face, including COVID, that we cannot overcome. But it's going to take togetherness. It's going to take organization. It's going to take revenue generating. So you're not always dependent on the benevolence of someone outside of the community. I think our communities can do a lot more toward self-reliance, self-empowerment, and moving forward.
What does that look like in your opinion? Because it does feel like a daunting task to think that, how you can have impact.
Well, look, but let's just take the last 50 years. Look what has changed. There have been sea changes in America. When I grew up, Alex, in my hometown of Oxford, North Carolina, I could not go to the local library. until I was walking home one day from the ninth grade. I decided, hey, there's something wrong. I wanted to read a book. I thought it was just not only morally wrong, but socially, and I thought it was illegal. But a lot of times we become accustomed to our oppression, and we become tolerant of our oppression. And so at a young age, I was intolerant, and that's why I desegregated the local library. And what I learned from that was injustice, even though sometimes it may be very profound, as you've stated, those injustices can be not only challenged, but we can make a change. We can change our situation, but it's going to take our engagement. It's going to take our involvement. And that's why I'm so optimistic about the digital age, because quantitatively, we can reach more people now digitally. I was the national organizer of the Million Man March. That was very difficult. We didn't have all the internet and all of the Facebook or Instagram or Twitter that we have today. What we are, everybody has a device. We didn't have those devices even in 1995, but we were able to mobilize 1 million brothers to come to Washington safely, peacefully, and address what we were going to do to stop black-on-black crime in our community. People who say, why do we have the Million Man March? Primarily, it was to get us to stop the fratricide in our own community. It was to get us to have greater respect for our women, greater responsibility for taking care of our families, taking care of our children. People say it takes a village to raise a child. Absolutely. But also it takes an empowered child to raise the village. And that's what we need to do today, to empower our children to become the leaders of tomorrow. It shouldn't be a guessing game. Every time I see our brothers and sisters winning those gold medals at the Olympics, that took preparation. You just don't show up at a track meet and win. You got to prepare. You got to, have a sense of discipline in order to achieve a victory. Not only, and so to me, it's just not about, or if I can use that analogy, winning a particular track meet. This is about winning victories for the journey of life itself. And that is why, I'm very pleased, again, to join with Check This Out, because I want people to check out all the opportunities. I want you to check out what empowerment is about. I want you to check out what it means to become an entrepreneur in the tech space. I want you to check out what it means to get involved in interplanetary exploration. There's so much that we need to learn. I mentioned I'm a chemist. I want to see the periodic chart expand. There are minerals out there. There are factors that we have not even discovered. But I want us to be involved in not only those discoveries, but to live in a better quality of life for people around the world.
It really is exciting to hear about all of the opportunities that are being created. I mean, it's so much more than, like, you're right, just an athlete. You can be an artist inside of the digital world. There's opportunity to create and be and do so much more than what is kind of presented to us. We just have to be willing and curious, and on behalf of those coming behind us, be willing to blaze some trails and try new things, because there's an entire world that's being created right now that we have an opportunity to get in on, and it just requires some participation and effort.
Listen, Alex, there's more opportunity today than ever before in the history of humanity. No one listening to this podcast should miss the opportunity not only to expand, to grow, not just become aware. Awareness is important. It's what you do with it. Once you get that truth, what you're going to do with it, how you're going to live with it, how is it going to change how you see the world. When you wake up in the morning, you go to sleep at night, what are you praying about? And how you're going to let God know you can be the instrument to which that prayer is fulfilled in your own life. That's why I'm optimistic, because I've seen change. Look at South Africa. I knew Mandela when he was in prison for 27 years. Brother comes out, not with a lot of hate, not with a lot of bitterness. And he created a transformation of apartheid South Africa into a free South Africa today. That doesn't mean that all the problems in South Africa are solved. No, but we're on that pathway toward a better place where the quality of life is improved for South Africans. And if we can dismantle apartheid in South Africa, we need to continue to work to dismantle apartheid in America.
Yes, 100%. And I definitely, like you, I'm super optimistic about the changes that I see happening and occurring and the opportunities that are being created that are currently available. As a result of ill effects of automation, there's been a lot of discussion centered around universal basic income. Universal basic income, for those who don't know, is the basic income guaranteed, like a living allowance that guarantees annual income. Is this an option or a solution?
I think it's a real option and a real solution. I would rather have universal guaranteed income than universal guaranteed poverty. I would like to have universal guaranteed income versus universal guaranteed mass incarceration, which is more costly. You know how much it costs to incarcerate a person for decades? You could get a doctorate degree and still have a refund on an annual basis for the money that's wasted dehumanizing prisons, dehumanizing people in prison. So yes, I think universal guaranteed income is not only an option, I think it's a preferable strategy moving forward. Because if you give that income, people are going to utilize that income in the economy. It is a direct relationship between income and the gross national product of any nation. And I think now that the census report just came out, the 2020 census report, just been released this year a few days ago. And what is happening? I wasn't shocked. I knew it was happening. Now the browning of America has accelerated, exponentially. 18-year-olds now, young people, Generation Z, are majority children of color, mixed race children of color. That should be celebrated. And quite frankly, I'll be honest with you, the attack on the Capitol on January the 6th was not just to stop the orderly, peaceful transition of power. It was a reaction of fear to the browning of America. When we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, that's something that corporations need to take seriously because you're talking about the future. How are you going to have a workforce that doesn't reflect the population? How are you going to produce products with a workforce that doesn't reflect the population, but yet you want to sell those products to that population? So what I'm saying to corporate America, diversity is good for business. Equity is good for business. Inclusion is good for business. Digital innovation is good for business.
It's certainly right now a unique time in history where it's important to look at what's happening around us and to embrace the change because, to your point, why wouldn't you want to create a more inclusive environment where ideas are represented, people feel seen, and the opportunity to collectively make our shared space better?
Absolutely. And I just want to, Alex, take this to a global perspective. You can't build walls, shut humanity out. We need to be welcoming all people to the United States. But welcoming them to what? We should be welcoming people to poverty. We should be welcoming people to a situation of homelessness. I live and work in Washington, D.C., the nation's capital.
Mm-hmm.
Across the street from the nation's capital, people are lying in the street, pitching little tents. This is America. We could solve the homeless problem. We could solve poverty with universal guaranteed income. But we also need universal guaranteed education because people need to be educated of how to spend the money. And I'm not against having a good time, but the best time in life is to improve the quality of your life while you have that life. I think the greatest tragedy, Alex, that I've seen in my long years of civil rights movement is people live their whole life and don't even discover their God-given gifts, more than one, their God-given gifts and talents. That's our job. That's not being woke to injustice. No, you want to be awakened to your own God-given gifts and talents so you can maximize it. If people believe that God has given them something special, and the God that I know has given us more than one thing special. We have so many gifts that we never use. You know, scientific gifts, artistic gifts, social gifts, the ability to articulate. That's why I'm a hip hop head. I love hip hop because it's evolving. And I know there are a lot of player haters out there on the culture, but the truth of the matter is, hip hop is a cultural phenomenon about the oneness of humanity. It's about the oneness of God, about the oneness of opportunity. And brothers and sisters, they may dance a little different. You may call it break dance. They may throw some paint up on the wall. You may see it as graffiti. We see it as a work of art. You know, they may take some turntables and scratch the 1 and 2s. That's music. We're redefining what is music over the noise of oppression, over the noise of discrimination, over the noise of injustice. We have to come together and make a new reality. And you do that for yourself. You do that for your own family. You do that for your own community. You do it for all of humanity.
I mean, it's so important. We all have purpose and the opportunity to live that out and, do great things. Because like you said, and I believe that as well, the one thing that makes us all so special is that we are one of one. And that is your secret sauce, that God created just one of you. And so we all have the ability and opportunity and power to go be great because that's what we were here to do.
Absolutely. But we need to amplify that because people whisper it. And sometimes people don't even articulate it. People go around like holding their head down. I know some brothers and sisters who do good in school. They're ashamed because they're going to be referred to as a nerd if they make an A in class. Come on. We have always striven for excellence. You know, who built the pyramids? Who were the first mathematicians?
Right.
Who were the first astrophysicists?
Mm-hmm.
That's part of our lineage.
Right.
That's part of our, it's just not only that we are resilient people, but I'm going to say this now. When you affirm one's own gifts, you also have to affirm the gifts of others. You know, I'm a little concerned that people think that, there's a narrow pathway to heaven. No, there are many pathways. And we should never get in the way of somebody else's travail. We should be helping one another. Mm-hmm. And that's what I learned in the Civil Rights Movement. You know, I've seen people help one another. Mm-hmm. You know, sometimes it's just marching. Sometimes it's carrying a picket sign. Sometimes it's telling a young person, look, read this book. Study this, study God. You know, I've been through what you've been through. You know, in terms of brothers and sisters in urban situations. I try to get them out of the gangs. You know, you don't want a one-way street. Mm-hmm. You don't want to plan your funeral. You know, you want to plan how you're going to own your business, how you're going to take care of your community, how you're going to share what God has blessed you with the rest of the world. So it is about aspirations. It is about trying to present oneself, not as some individual who's only blessed, but no, you see yourself more collectively, part of the human progress. And then we all make a contribution. And I just think that the young people today, I'm going to say this about our youth today. I think our youth today, Alex, are the most blessed, the most talented, the most intellectually capable, the most intelligent young brothers and sisters we've ever been blessed to witness in our communities. But here's the challenge. There's so much in this world that discourages our young people, that diverts them, or, you heard about the pipeline from school to prison. Mm-hmm. That's terrible. We got to stop that. And I think that that's part of what I'm hoping that Tech This Out would do, and Digital Mindset would do, give our young people, Digital Mind State would do, would give our young people a better sense of not only their self-worth, but the ability to move forward. Aspiration is so important. And there's a lot in our society, Alex, that discourages young people from having an aspiration. They just kind of go through life wondering what the next day is going to be. rather than going through life planning what the next day is going to be, planning one's future, and then having the energy and the self-respect to go out and make it happen. That's why I'm an optimist.
I'm like so excited. I feel like that's it's so important to have the energy because you really can't be what you can't see. And it's important that as we're inspired to take the action to go and do that thing that's going to create the opportunity for not just ourselves, but those coming behind us.
I have a close friend at MIT, and he told me once, he said, Ben, if you don't know what the future is going to be, make the future what it should be. Plan it, strategize, organize. And you can have a plan A, plan B, plan C. Because plan A don't work, it's okay. You got a plan B, plan C. Alex, I don't know if you play chess. I'm a chess player.
Mm-hmm.
I don't plan my next move. I plan my next 5 moves. But I not only just plan my next 5 moves, I plan your next 5 moves. So I move in a way that you're moving toward the plan where we all can win the game.
I 100% hear that because it definitely is on that level where, all the decisions that people are making do have the power to impact people behind them in a positive way. So as we talk about, the future in space, especially because this is really exciting, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Richard Branson, they're all on the space chase. Some have made it. So the talks of space have started to heat up. Why is that?
Well, I think these 3 billionaires are not just doing it for their own ego. I think they sense what the next $1 trillion market is going to be. It is going to be space exploration. It is going to be intersecting what happens on Earth, what happens in the heavens, and what happens in the heavens is going to determine what happens on Earth. Look at climate change. A lot of the forest fires that are now going on, a lot of the earthquakes that used to be 4 and 5 on the Richter scale, now there's 7.2 on the Richter scale. So what's happening? We got to pay attention to nature. We can learn a lot from nature, but also we have to pay attention to what we do as human beings that distort the balance of the equilibrium of the world. And I think that exploration is something that's upon us. And I want to make sure that there's diversity, equity, and inclusion in space, as I make sure that there's diversity, equity, and inclusion on Earth. Absolutely. So I think that we have some work to do, particularly in the STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And I think our young people are going to be up to it. I'm optimistic, instead of us styling on who got the latest tennis shoe, sooner or later it's going to be who's got the latest spacesuit.
Up for the challenge. I mean, we definitely saw how key African Americans, the role they played in movies like Hidden Figure. So it's only natural to make sure that it is a priority that we have that same kind of impact as it relates to space. Words like space colony or space settlements remind me of the Europeans and how they colonized, settled, and kind of took over whole countries. Do you think that's the play with space, the final frontier?
Well, I think we have to learn from history, not repeat history. And I think we have to learn from the period of colonization, neo-colonization, imperialism. All these are terms that are not much in the lexicon today, but they're very important. And I think what we do on the moon, what we do on Mars, what we do on Jupiter, and what we do on other planets should not replicate the wrongs that we did on Earth. That wouldn't make sense. I think we have to learn from what we did on Earth and not make those misjudgments, those miscalculations, those prejudices, those oppressions. I think we want to make the world a better place. We don't want to make the world a segregated world. We've seen what happened to segregation in America. We've seen what happened to the transatlantic slave trade. So I'm not going to rest for people to even contemplate having an intergalactic slave trade.
It's so interesting. Just like history is something to pay attention to because the oppressor always does write the story. So it is really important that as we're looking into the next world that is being created, which now feels imminent and not so much an idea, that we really do concentrate on making sure that it is everything that we imagine Earth could be, but in a perfect world, what space will be.
Exactly. And I just want to say the importance of writing. I've mentioned earlier the importance of reading. James Baldwin, one of our greatest writers, is a personal friend of mine. And before he passed, he reached in his pocket and took out his pen. And he said, Ben, the pen is mightier than the sword. What we write will last for generations. What we say may be repeated for generations, but what we write will be indelible in the tablet of human history.
Yeah, so it is very important then that we document and make sure that we don't repeat those same mistakes.
Absolutely, and we need to write about our experiences. We have so many stories. We have so many. That's why I'm challenging the publishing world. If you look at all the books on the bestseller list, most of them are how-to books, no problem with that. But I'm looking for books where we can learn, and that's why I don't want us to get on the defensive about critical race theory, whether or not all children should be taught about the truth. I think all children not only should be taught the truth, but they deserve to know the truth. So we won't go back and repeat. Let me say this on the record, Alex. I don't think anyone is born a racist. I don't think anyone is born with prejudice. I think that's part of the social condition. And it starts at a very early age. Mm-hmm. And I think most Americans, we all have some prejudice of some form. But at some point, with a good education, you let those prejudices go. You realize that those stereotypes and those myths don't apply to yourself or it doesn't apply to other people either. And I just think that digital education, again, I want to tie this up because I think technology should be used. The latest innovations in technology, we should have a more informed public. We should have a more educated public. We should have a more informed world, a more educated world, to the extent to which we use the advances in innovation and technology to get that truth out, not just in America, but throughout the world.
And if ever there was a time to do that where the mics are open and the audience is there, it's like right now.
Absolutely. That's one of my favorite slogans, if I could say, out of the freedom movement in Africa and freedom movement in America, and freedom movement in the Caribbean, is A luta continua. The struggle continues.
The struggle continues. Well, so then before we let you go, because this has been such a pleasure, thank you so much, Dr. Chavis, for your time and for imparting so much knowledge and helping us to understand how we can continue to have, lasting impacts. What's your advice to college students, digital entrepreneurs? Like, what do they need to know about the way the world is moving? What do we, the culture, need to do to be future-proof?
Well, I think that all college students who want to be digital entrepreneurs first should try to get the best education that's out there in the classroom, online. I think that digital entrepreneurs, to the extent to which you can be successful, you have to believe in what you're doing. I know a lot of people who kind of experiment with different jobs. They'll be writing their resumes to fit different jobs. But I think competence is so important. And what I mean by competence is what you know, what you've learned, but it's also what you've applied in your own experiences. That's when you become competent in something. You may be good in math, but if you don't use that math to solve problems, then you have to raise a question, am I competent in math? I'm competent in chemistry, not only because I learned all the chemical equations and some of the theories of chemistry, but I applied in my life. So I know what bringing diverse compounds together to create a new compound does in life. I know what the meaning of a catalyst. You add something to increase the speed of something reaches its fulfillment. Because sometimes I think we wait, we procrastinate, we wait for something to happen. Sometimes,
Get him!
as a minister, I believe in miracles, but I also believe that people make miracles happen. They just don't happen by osmosis. They happen by you engaging. You have faith in what you're doing, and you make something out sometimes out of nowhere. Like our grandparents used to say, we make a way out of no way. How do you do that? And some would say, well, that's alchemy. No, that's not alchemy. That's taking what's in that you have in your own hands and making it, utilize it so it creates a better way. And if you look at some of the geniuses that come out of our community, like George Washington Carver, taking that little peanut and making all kinds of things out of the little peanut. I mean, we are scientifically inclined, but because of racial prejudice, sometimes we're socialized to think that we can't be scientists. Sometimes we're socialized and miseducated to think that we can't achieve. And that's why in these early stages of space exploration, I want to make sure that our young people not only see that at some distance, but see it up close and be determined today what space exploration is going to benefit and make it possible for humanity not only to survive on Earth, but to survive in the whole universe.
Okay, there we go. This has been an incredible opportunity to learn from someone who's been just leading the charge from just the beginning as it relates to equity, diversity, inclusion, and creating opportunities. And as we pass the baton and keep moving things forward, I'm just so grateful to have the opportunity to learn from you. So thank you so much for sharing your desires and dreams as it relates to the youth and how we will continue to carry what you've started here and keep pushing it forward, because it's important that we all have a space and create opportunity for ourselves in now and in the future and for others coming behind us.
Well, I want to thank you, Alex, for this engaging discussion. And I'm hoping that millions of people will listen and that millions of people will respond. And I like the analogy about the relay race. We all are running our laps. And at a certain point, we were going to have to pass the baton. And I just want to make sure that as we run our individual and our collective races of life, that we pass the baton to a new generation that's not only ready to run the race, but ensured that they're going to win the race, not only for themselves as runners, but win the race for all of humanity, for all people of this world, and for all entities of this universe.
Amazing. Well, we have our marching orders, and thank you so much for your time. This is Alex B on Tech This Out News. We connect the streets.